Hi, I'm a GP in Glasgow. I have lived and worked in this country since I came here about 8 years ago. I have paid all my taxes throughout. There has been a lot of pressure on the political parties to be tough on immigration. I want to ask whether there is any recognition or support for people like us who want to live and settle here with our families, because I feel that I benefit the economy more than a white single mother of 7 who have lived all her life, never worked in her life, and claiming all the benefit in the world and more.
Thank you. So Dr. George wants to know if the benefit system basically discriminates against hard-working people. And I should say the leaders have not had any prior knowledge of these questions. Jim Murphy.
Well, Dr. George, thank you very much for your question, and thank you everyone for being here today. My view is very clear, is that if you go out to work, you take your kids to school and get up in the morning, you should always be better off in work than you are in benefit. I think it should be a cast iron guarantee in our society that if you can be bothered to get up, look after your kids, and get them to school, you should always be better off than someone who perhaps just cannot be bothered. The Labour Party has always been a party that believes in full employment and the right to work. So if you can work, you should be able to work, which is why we are guaranteeing in this election that you're guaranteed to be at least £2,000 a year better off if you do go into work.
Thank you. Now, David Mundell.
The Conservatives will support people who want to work, people who do the right thing. What our policy says, however, is that unlike over 13 years of Labour government, we will tackle the issue of those people who don't want to work and still claim benefit. We've said, for example, that if you have 3 examples of benefit fraud, you'll have your benefit cut. We will support people getting into work. I believe that lots of people who are currently not in work and receiving benefits do want to be able to work, but they don't get the support that they need to do that, and we will provide that support.
Thank you. Alistair Carmichael.
One of the problems with the way that we set up our system at the moment is that people who are on low and middle incomes are expected to give a subsidy to people who are high earners. And that's the way the tax system works, and I think that has got to change. So our party stands in this election on a policy of taking the first £10,000 that everybody earns out of taxation altogether, and that puts £700 a year into the pocket of everybody. There has to be some recognition of the fact that the people who need help most are those on low and middle incomes. We shouldn't be allowing them to subsidise the rich.
Thank you. Thank you. Alex Salmond.
Well, there's a good deal of agreement on this issue, but the problem is that at the current moment, what happens often when people move into work, they actually end up worse off because of things like housing benefit and council tax benefit get withdrawn. In fact, you can have an effective marginal rate of taxation of 90%. Some people are even worse off if they move into work, and that's exactly what should be changed. You know, we hear a lot of debate about marginal rates of taxation on rich people. But nobody, not even the richest person in the country, pays marginal rates of tax at 90%. And therefore it's really, really important that we look at the council tax benefit system, the housing benefit system, and make it worthwhile and encourage people into work.
And there is now a chance for free-flowing debate, no guaranteed time. Who wants to jump in first?
Well, I think the charge against Jim Murphy and the Labour Party is that they have had 13 years to deal with this issue. When Tony Blair first came to power, he asked Frank Field to look at the issue of benefits, but because the proposals were too radical or challenged too many Labour union interests, nothing was done. And now Jim is coming forward 13 years later to say that he's going to make work pay. Why didn't you do it during the last 13 years, Jim?
David. We've done an awful lot over the last years to make work pay. We introduced the national minimum wage. Your party fought it tooth and nail and said it would cost 1 million jobs. We introduced tax credits, many of which you now are determined to restrict. So we made a huge improvement in making work pay, but we do need to go further. There are people who want to go out to work and they look at the cost of childcare, mums in particular, affordable childcare, and it's really essential that we now absolutely guarantee that people who go to work are better off than those people who are able to work but refuse to work. And we're determined to do that, David. And better than just chastising us, It'd be much better if you supported our plans to increase the national minimum wage and all of the other tax credits that we have.
How, Jim, can you say that giving people tax credits who are earning over 50,000 is helping the poorest people on these marginal tax rates?
David, your plans are to get rid of child trust funds for people on modest incomes, even just at £16,000.
Can I adjudicate between these two persons?
David, if you don't know your own policy, that's not my fault, but that is your policy.
That is not, and you well know that.
For people on modest incomes.
Adam, you should have had them standing together, then they would have found it a lot easier. And the point I'm going to make is that it's not just Jim who's had 13 years in government. You had 17 years in government before that. And yet, George has pointed to a situation where there aren't real incentives to get people into work. So instead of blaming each other for who did what and who didn't do what, then just accept that there have been decades of failure of majority Tory governments and majority Labour governments, and George is still, in 2010, asking a question which we all agree with, but we haven't found a solution yet, so let's get to it.
Part of the problem is that we now have a system which is so complex that so many families, especially those that are getting tax credit, don't know from 1 month to the next what income they're going to have, because they're given money that they claim and they take in good faith, and then they're told it's been overpaid, and they're ending up sometimes with as little as £10, £20 a week to feed a family. I've got a constituent in Shetland, an apprentice mechanic, who earns £119 a week after tax. And when he has paid his rent, his council tax and his bus fares to work, before he's even put a bite of food in his mouth or heated a room in his home, he is left with £19 a week. If he stayed at home with job seekers allowance, he would have £45 a week. That has got to be wrong. That's got to change.
I think George also wanted to make the point that perhaps he feels that immigrants such as himself who come to this country and work are unfairly stigmatised sometimes in general political discussion.
Well, I think that's very unfortunate, sorry, Jim, if he does, because, I mean, immigrants have played a very valuable role in constituencies like my own, where they have provided work that wouldn't otherwise have been provided. And I think that we have to acknowledge that. But it doesn't mean that we also can't talk about immigration and some of the other issues which come from immigration, because I think
debate has often been cast, David, in a very negative terms. About immigration. In Scotland, we've had generations of immigrant communities from Poland, from Ireland. They've added to Scottish society. They're part of the fabric of who we are. And what I think George was referring to is, if the debate is always cast in negative terms, that immigration and immigrants therefore seen as a problem, that just does not reflect the Scottish experience. We should be proud of the communities who've come to Scotland and made this country what it is.
Mr. Carmichael.
The language that we use here is important. And I have to say there have been many things that have disappointed me about Gordon Brown and the Labour Party in the last 13 years. But one of the biggest disappointments I ever saw was the day he talked about British jobs for British workers. That really was unworthy of the Labour Party.
Well, I've got to declare an interest with a name like Murphy. Many of my family, of course, came from Ireland, so I'll leave it to these three to judge whether immigration is a success on this occasion. But I think, George, I think you're the type, without knowing all your details, of course, you're the type of person that we wish to attract to Scotland, people with skills who can make our country even better than it is today. And one of the frustrations I have is the way in which, at a time of recession, there's great difficulty about this conversation about immigration, but we have to be very clear. This recession wasn't caused by immigrants. It wasn't caused by a Polish plumber or a Bangladeshi shop worker. It was caused by bankers, some of whom are very close to where we are today.
Ross.
Well, I mean, the basic problem as far as immigration is concerned is that the wider system's a mess. You know, nobody knows. We think we maybe have 700,000, 800,000, 900,000 people here irregularly, but nobody knows with any degree of certainty, because for years the government, Conservative and Labour, have refused to count people as they went out of the country.
There we're going to end this debate on the first question. There are lots more coming back from the Scotland debate here in Edinburgh. Stay with us.